Hello, this is Political Forum for Wednesday, October 26th. Today we welcome State Representative Lou Lang of the 16th District. Representative Lang, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
It's my pleasure, Liz.
Thank you. I'm Liz Granato. I'm a board member here at CAN TV. You are watching a live interactive program brought to you as a community service by the CAN TV board. Please be sure to tell your friends and family that they can also watch this show online at cantv.org/hotline. We welcome your questions and comments for Representative Lang. You can call us at 312-738-1060. We will do our best to get everyone's questions and comments in the next 25 minutes. So, as we get started, Representative Lang, I'd love it if you could tell us a little bit about your district and the areas that you represent.
Sure. I've represented the general area in which I lived for 29 years. I represent about half of Skokie, a little corner of Morton Grove, all of Lincolnwood, and most of West Rogers Park in the city.
Excellent. And then I also have here the information for your office. You can contact Representative Lang via phone at 847-673-1131 or via his email at replulang@aol.com. And Representative, what is the best way for your constituents to get in touch with you?
Either of these ways works, but I'm very good at answering email, and so if people want to reach out to me that way, sometimes they can be a little more long-winded, sometimes they can add an attachment they want me to read. I'm happy to do that, and I will get back to them.
Great. And we will show that information again throughout the show, just so to make sure that you have access to that information. So as we get started tonight, one of the things that has been in the news a lot lately is the state's budget situation, or lack thereof, as it could be said. Can you tell us a little bit about the status of the state's budget and where we're heading?
Currently, we're working on what we call a stopgap budget. We couldn't get a budget passed through both chambers of the General Assembly and signed by the governor. In fact, we went a year and a half without a budget of any kind, and we had to make sure the schools opened, and so we convinced the governor to sit down and negotiate what we call a stopgap budget that keeps the lights on until the end of the year. You know, Liz, we passed a budget in May of 2015, and the governor chose to veto that budget. He didn't have to veto it. Even if he felt it was out of balance, which he said he did, he could have taken a red pen and line item vetoed the budget. Under our Constitution, a governor has the ability to reduce any line item in a budget. If he really wanted a budget, he could have done that, and we did not have to go the last 2 years without a budget. But he chose purposely to throw us into a political firestorm, chaos, and hold the state of Illinois hostage over some things he wants to do, which the votes don't exist for, but more importantly have nothing to do with the budget. So imagine child care programs and senior programs and health care programs, and our state universities suffering because the governor simply will not sit down at the table and negotiate the budget, and he's chosen to put us into this situation rather than negotiating. Some want to blame my leadership. So there's a public narrative out there that says, oh, it's a big argument between Bruce Rauner and Mike Madigan. But the fact is that's not true. The fact is we passed the budget. We're willing to pass another budget. We're willing to sit down and negotiate with the governor. But he has simply said he is not even going to sit down at the table and discuss the budget with us until he gets certain provisions like throwing working men and women under the bus by removing prevailing wage, or taking away their right to collectively bargain, or dismantling the workers' compensation system so that if you fall off a scaffold and you're badly injured, you won't be taken care of. This is not right, and I don't agree with the governor on these items, but I want to tell you that even if I did, it's unconscionable and simply wrong to hold the state hostage over these issues when there are so many people hurting in the state of Illinois today.
Understood. And you talk about some of the things that the governor has prioritized, and we hear a lot about the turnaround agenda. Are these items part of the turnaround agenda? What is the governor's turnaround agenda, so that our viewers out there can learn a little bit more about what they're talking about in the
Sure.
past?
The items I mentioned are part of the turnaround agenda. Additionally, he has term limits on that agenda, and he has redistricting reform on that agenda. Now, we could debate these issues long and hard, and there would be people on both sides of these issues, and there would actually be people on both sides of these issues from both parties. But the fact is that to say we're not going to have a budget, that we're going to allow our state universities to crumble, or 125,000 students who rely on the MAP grants to go to our state universities not to get those MAP grants, ruining their chance to finish their college education, is simply wrong. And so we say, Governor, let's do our budget, let's do it fairly, let's make cuts, let's find revenue where we need it to take care of the values of the people of the state of Illinois. Let's make sure our universities open, and we fix the roof on the universities, and we get the college kids the money they need, and we have senior programs and child care programs and programs for the mentally ill and people with epilepsy, and you can imagine all the dozens and hundreds of programs we have that are not being funded. Let's do that, and then if you want to have a discussion about your political agenda, we can go ahead and do that, but the time is wrong to do that.
Understood. I do want to talk a little bit about some legislation that you have passed and personally sponsored yourself. I believe you've been working on some anti-drug and anti-heroin legislation. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
In 2014, I started a task force with 39 members of the House, fully a third of the House, people on both sides of the aisle, traveled the state with me, and we heard from hundreds of witnesses on the issue of drug abuse, particularly heroin abuse, overdoses, what to do about it, how to manage it. This came about because Illinois has become the hub, ground zero for the heroin crisis in our country. In fact, there are more ODs in Illinois than in New York or California or any state larger than us. And we decided we wanted to do this correctly, and so we traveled the state, we heard from lots of people, and we drafted a bill that goes into many, many, many different provisions, but in the end it's become a national model. Many other states have come to us to say, how did you do this? And even congressmen and senators from Washington have contacted me to maybe make it a national model. Senator Durbin has now made heroin abuse one of his top priorities. We're going to save lives. We've already saved lives, and that's important, but it also keeps families intact, keeps people working, keeps them out of jail, and this relies on rehabilitation rather than incarceration of people who are drug addicted, and it's going to be very helpful moving into the future.
Wonderful. And we do have a caller on the line. Caller, go ahead with your question.
Hi, Representative.
Hello.
My question is along the lines of what you were just talking about with the Heroin Crisis Act. I know that it's, like you mentioned, it's been adopted in other states as well. I read recently that there was some, I guess there was going to be a push or something to maybe make it on a national level, and like maybe some things like grant programs for like combating the use and things like that. Has there been any progress with that on a national level?
Not quite yet, but the good news is that 3 different United States congressmen, not from Illinois, and also Senator Durbin have taken it upon themselves to call me to be fully briefed on this legislation to see how it can be made a national model and how D.C. can be helpful in distributing some funds to help the states combat this problem. I should also say that the Clinton people, Hillary Clinton's staff, sat with me for 3 hours to get a briefing on this. I know this is a very important part of her agenda, and I'm hopeful that we can help her move that along.
And we do have another caller on the line. Caller, go ahead with your question.
Yes, concerning the budget and mental health, I know that there's been a lot of cuts to mental health clinics around, and there's an effect for that because it seems like people are going to be losing jobs. There could be more people who are becoming homeless, and obviously there could be an increase in crime. So what can we do to try to get these mental health clinics supported and reopened so that people can get the care they need?
That's actually an excellent question and leads into my plans for the coming year. Many years ago, I started the first mental health committee ever in the Illinois General Assembly, and we did some good things. For instance, we created mental health parity laws in Illinois, where mental illness has to be treated in insurance policies as physical illness is. But now I feel that the mental health delivery system in the state of Illinois is broken. I feel that it's not delivering the services it should, and I think some ways, because 4 or 5 different state agencies deal with mental health, we're wasting money and there's overlapping services. Sheriff Dart would tell you that the Cook County Jail is the largest provider of mental health services in the state of Illinois, maybe in the country. We have to tackle this problem. As I'm sure the caller knows, 1 out of every 4 families in Illinois has a mentally ill family member. And to continue to ignore this and sweep this under the rug is not good for Illinois, it's not good for our economy, and it's certainly not good for families. So the next major task that I'm going to work on is to put together another task force, just as I did with the heroin crisis, travel the state, get everybody's opinion, and try to put some kind of significant and comprehensive piece of legislation together to deal with mental illness.
Wonderful. And we do have another caller on the line. Caller, go ahead with your question.
Yes, Representative Lang, I wonder if you can give an update on the status of the state veterans home that's run by the Illinois Department of Veterans Affairs. Was supposed to open this past spring on North Oak Park Avenue. Due to budget impasse, the project was delayed, the construction stopped, and here we are going over, it's going to be going on a year that it should have been open because of the political budget pass that's going on, and this is a travesty to the veterans that need it. We've got Korean, Vietnam era veterans, World War II still, that are needed as home, and because of politics, it's at a standstill.
I couldn't agree with you more, sir. The budget that we passed in May of 2015 would have funded the construction of that facility. The governor, as you know, vetoed that budget. And since the governor won't sit down and discuss the budget with us, and he won't sit down and discuss a separate budget, which we would call the capital budget, which is a budget we use for building things, we just can't move this ball forward. The governor has said there won't be any capital money expended until there's a budget, but then he won't sit down and negotiate the budget with us. So at its core, and I know this sounds political to the viewers, but I can only tell you the truth as I know it. At its core, the one person responsible for this is Bruce Rauner. And until he is moved to sit down at the table and make these things happen, or until we have a different governor, there's not going to be a change.
That also does bring me to my question. I was wondering, can you explain what happens when we don't have a budget? How do people get paid? How do we move forward with the things that the state needs to spend money on?
Well, first, it's embarrassing to even have to talk about this, because the regular public who reads the papers and who isn't there every day watching what we do gets the impression, as I said before, this is some big political war. The fact is there are many, many in Springfield that want to get these issues resolved. Mm-hmm. When we don't have a budget, there are people that aren't being paid. So let's just take one state agency called Lutheran Social Services. Lutheran Social Services provided many different social services to thousands, healthcare services, and many, many other things that they did. Thousands of people a year. This organization had to close. They had to fire 750 people. So that's 750 families that lost their provider, but worse, there are thousands of people relying on Lutheran Social Services who don't get what they need anymore. And you can multiply this by hundreds of all of the agencies, not-for-profit, local providers of services in the state of Illinois that have gone belly up, that have closed, and even if we had a budget tomorrow, many of these folks would not be able to reopen. Their employees have gone on to other places, and restarting the infrastructure for the delivery system of state services, whether it's by the state or by providers, is going to take a very long time. Just take a look at our state universities. Our state universities are crumbling, and they're crumbling on the inside and the outside. There are buildings that are not being fixed. I was just at the University of Illinois, my alma mater, and I walked by a school building, and it was in drastic need of repair, and I don't know much about it, but I could see it was in drastic need of repair, all held up because there's no budget. Now, there are some providers being paid who are being paid due to long-standing consent orders by in the federal court. Those folks are being paid, but interestingly, they're being paid based on 2015 revenue. In 2015, we still had the 5% income tax. So every check we write based on those court orders to these providers is actually money we don't have. And so one of the reasons we have several $billion in backlog bills and why we're so underwater now is because we don't have a budget, and because the state income tax increase reverted, and because the courts are ordering us to pay these folks based on money we don't have. It gets worse and worse, and we go farther and farther underwater.
And we do have another caller on the line. Caller, go ahead with your question.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. So I wanted to ask the representative, I read earlier today that the Chicago Cubs withdrew an offer to sell Cubs tickets to the city's aldermen at face value, and I guess that was upsetting to some of the aldermen, but I understand that the decision was made after recommendation from the city ethics board, and I just wanted to get your perspective as someone who might be able to understand both sides about whether or not that was the right thing for the Cubs organization to do.
Well, some have alleged that because City Council has to vote on zoning changes for the Cubs, particularly since they're building in Wrigleyville around the ballpark all sorts of stores and hotels and restaurants, and decisions have to be made. The ethics officer for the City of Chicago felt that this could be a conflict of interest. I suppose one can argue that it is, but as someone in the political process who knows that I would never and most people I know would never change their vote over a ticket to a game, particularly one where they are paying face value and they're not getting it for free. I think it's an overblown issue. Not that it's not important, and not that I don't understand the ethical considerations of the City of Chicago's ethics officer, but I just think it's a little overblown. People will make of it what they will. As you know, a lot of people have great suspicions about everybody who's an elected official, everybody who's in public life. And that's because our names and our faces are on the front of the newspaper every day. We don't necessarily check the ethics and morals of everybody else in the world, our plumber and our doctor and our lawyer and our accountant. We don't see their names in the newspaper every day. And so there's not a lot of talk about whether the Cubs might be giving some of them a ticket at face value. So I think it's an important issue, but I do think it's a little overblown.
Great. And I do want to remind viewers that you're watching Political Forum tonight. This is a community service of CAN TV. I'm Liz Granato, a board member with CAN TV. This is a live interactive show. We do encourage you to call in with any comments or questions for the representative. You can call our number at 312-738-1060. One of the hot topics of the time right now is the presidential election. Can you give us your thoughts on the presidential election?
Well, I should say first, anyone who knows me knows I'm a Democrat. I'm a strong Democrat. I'm the Executive Vice Chairman of the Cook County Democratic Party. I'm the Niles Township Democratic Committeeman. I'm the Deputy Majority Leader of the Illinois House. All of these give me sort of a Democratic perspective on things. Having said that, though, I think there are a lot of people out there in the world appalled at what they're hearing coming from Donald Trump and from his people. And I think there are a lot of people who normally don't vote for Democrats that are rethinking their position, even if it's just this time. And I think there are a lot of Republicans who may just simply stay home because they've had enough of this guy. I think Hillary Clinton's going to win this election. I hope 2 weeks from now. I'm not swallowing those words, but I believe that is the case, and I believe she's going to be a fine president and make us proud.
Wonderful, wonderful. You have spent a lot of time in public office. You're on your 16th term, right? Can you tell us, looking back on your history working in the General Assembly, have you ever experienced a time like we're experiencing now? And how is the climate in Springfield different from what you've experienced in the past with other governors?
That's a really good question. And so, no, this is the worst time ever in Springfield to try to get something done. We had some difficult times under Rod Blagojevich, a governor from my party, but he didn't play nice in the sandbox with the legislature. He didn't understand the role of the legislature under the Constitution, and neither does Bruce Rauner. Bruce Rauner came from a business climate. He was the boss of everything, and he came to Springfield thinking that governor is boss and that everyone that works in government is his employee, even the other elected officials. And of course, that's not what the Constitution says. The Constitution says we're a co-equal branch of government. So I like to say that while the governor wants me to work for him, my position is I don't work for him, but I sure would like to work with him. And that's really up to him. For those who say, well, why don't you guys compromise? We've offered any number of compromises. And for those who say it's Mike Madigan's fault, I'll just say this. Mike Madigan's been there over 40 years, and for the first 38 years, whether we had a Democratic governor or a Republican governor, there was a budget. The last 2 years we haven't had one. The only difference is Governor Rauner.
Understood, understood. Well, along other things going on in the state budget, one of the things that the governor has been trying to tackle is unions and collective bargaining rights. Can you tell us a little bit about what labor has been going through in the state of Illinois, what that means for Illinois citizens and workers here in Illinois? Tell us a little bit about that situation.
So during the gubernatorial campaign in 2014, the governor was very clear that he was not a big fan of collective bargaining, that he was not a big fan of labor, organized labor, working men and women, and which to me means he's not a big fan of the working person, because even people who are not members of labor unions, who are working people, benefit from the negotiated contracts from labor unions. And the governor has done some very curious things. Just in the last couple of days, the governor provided millions of dollars of pay bonuses to non-union employees in the state of Illinois. He skipped over the union employees at a time where he's actually negotiating a labor contract with AFSCME, the largest state union. And so that was kind of a kick in the teeth to them. He kind of said to them, well, you see, you shouldn't be in that union. I'm not going to negotiate with you. I'm not going to finish up your contract. I'll make you work without a contract. But I'm going to give bonuses to people who aren't members of organized labor. I think that's wrong. I think it's wrong to set out to have as your goal the destruction of the middle class, which is really what he's after. He's after the improvement of life for the upper 1%. And as he goes about trying to improve life for the upper 1%, he's trying to destroy the middle class, bring down wages, and hurt workers in the state of Illinois, and I just think that's wrong.
So I do want to, again, thank you, Representative Lang, for being with us tonight. We do have only a couple minutes left in the show. I want to ask if there's any final comments you'd like to make before we wrap up.
Sure, I'm going to look the viewers in the eye and ask you to vote. It's really important. There's still time to register to vote. There's still time to vote absentee. Early voting has already started as we do this program. And when I went to vote early, I saw a long line. And so I haven't voted yet myself, but I'm going to go back. It was a very long line of interested people who have decided that this election they're going to make a difference. And you know, some of you that are watching might live in districts for state representative or state senator that are fairly uncontested. I myself have no opponent. But many of you have friends that live in the suburbs or downstate Illinois. You ought to call them and remind them how important it is. We've had elections won and lost by a dozen votes. There was one election that was won by a Democrat in the last election by 12 votes. So every vote counts, every vote matters. You cannot take the presidential election, the senatorial election, the election for comptroller of the state of Illinois, or any other election for granted. We need you to get out and vote. And if everybody votes, then we can all be sure that when there's a result, that it was the will of the people that made it so. So I would urge everyone to get out to vote.
Great. Well, thank you. And I do want to take a moment to show the overhead of your information for your office here, Representative. And this is the information for Representative Lang's office where you can reach him by email or phone. And Representative, thank you so much for joining us. It really has been a pleasure talking to you. And thank you for those viewers who joined us during the Cubs game. Again, you are watching CAN TV. This is Political Forum, which is brought to you as a public service by CAN TV. Our technician has been Sylvia. Sylvia, thank you. And you can join us every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. on CAN TV 21 and at cantv.org/hotline. Thank you very much and have a good night.